On this episode of ReLiterated, we explore a book that 90s kids are either a couple of years too old to have read, or they've forgotten they've read it at all. Some may faintly remember a story about a boy who runs a lot. Maybe they have an inkling that this kid untied a knot that no one else could untie. Surely they have forgotten a story about broken homes, divided towns, connections made, and loved ones lost. Let's dive into a tale full of bravery, tasty snacks, social dilemmas, and flappy shoes. It's Maniac Magee on episode 3 of ReLiterated, the hot librarian that's totally been checking you out. Welcome to ReLiterated, the lowbrow book club where 3 completely unqualified man-children read the children's books we grew up with, were assigned to read in school, or were otherwise popular during our childhood in the 90s, and reflect on the lessons we took away from them back then, if any, and compare them to how they read now from our current-day perspective as grown-ass men. We use language too mature for kids, analysis too immature for literary scholars, and ignorance too profound to be inoffensive to everyone. And boy, will we be running on the rail of sensitive topics tonight, but we'll get to that in a bit. First, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Andy, and my favorite snack cake would have to be Little Debbie strawberry shortcakes.
I'm Harold, and my favorite snack cake, closest I can come to it, would be fudge rounds.
I'm Josh, and my favorite snack cake are Nutty Bars.
All right, and there's a very good reason that we shared our favorite snack cakes. But first, before we get into our book of this episode, we'd like to thank everybody who has been listening to us. We, at this time of recording, with just 2 episodes, we've gotten 122 separate downloads. And I'd like to give a special thanks to my buddy Adam Salgett. When I put the call out on Facebook when we were at 99, I said, give a response here, and I'll give you a shout out for being the 100th download. And Adam, you hit it. So special thanks to you, and thanks to everybody else who's been listening to us.
Absolutely. We're doing more than I thought we would when we first started this, and I'm glad that it's interesting, and we're going to keep trying to make it that way.
Thanks for listening. I'm glad that you are enjoying what we're talking about, even though we go off on tangents. But, that's part of the fun of doing this. And,
it's part of podcasting.
Yeah. And, I enjoy being able to go to, how can I say this? I enjoy going back and being able to look at things from a new perspective. And sometimes, like this, in this case, I had never read it when I was younger. So this was a whole new book to me. So I'm also getting to have new experiences as well as follow-ups.
And that book that he's talking about is Maniac Magee. And this is actually a book that I brought up. I remember this book when I read it when I was younger. I didn't remember specifically everything about it. I remembered that he ran a lot. I remembered that he did a few other things that were these not feats of strength, but they were feats that would be legendary to kids.
Right. Yeah, we tackled this book in 4th grade. This was given to us. Harold, you and I were in separate 4th grade classes, right?
Did you have Mrs. Rogers?
No, I had Mrs. Post.
Yep, we had separate 4th grade classes.
But it was part of the 4th grade curriculum for some reason. And I obviously don't remember too much about the story because all I really remembered about Maniac Magee was it was just a kid who ran around a lot, and his shoes fall aparty and flapping around or whatever. And I also have another memory associated with Maniac Magee that I'll get to when we get to that part of the story. But it's something that came up as I was reading it, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I remember that, and I can't believe I did that.
Right. So this book was written by a gentleman named Jerry Spinelli. He started his writing career with a poem about a football team, his local football team that won a big game against the best team in the state. And his dad actually published it in the local newspaper without him knowing. And when he saw it, he decided that he was going to be a writer and not a cowboy or baseball player. He spent 25 years working regular day jobs before he released his first book, Space Station 7th Grade. It was published in 1982. And 8 years later is when we got the Newbery Award-winning book, Maniac Magee. He hails from...
Published in 1990, yeah.
Yep, 1990. He hails from Pennsylvania, which is the same state that Maniac Magee is based in. And this book is a really good book. I would recommend people read this book. It was fun. It's goes through all kinds of themes that you almost wouldn't expect them to put in a fourth grade curriculum, but at the same time, it does make sense to give this to kids at that age so they can kind of read it and wonder why things are the way they are in the book. It's sold...
Yeah, I think Jerry Spinelli showed off his talents as a writer in spades with Maniac Magee. Very deserving of that Newbery medal, in my opinion.
Very true. It's sold 3.3 million copies, which, seeing as though the book at this point is 30 years old, I think that's kind of a shame, but it's also awesome. I mean, I've never sold 3.3 million of anything. I just think that this book is more deserving of some time in the spotlight with people, even today. In fact, specifically today in the world we live in, it's a good book to show kids some of the harder things that are truths in our daily lives. It's fun. There's adventures. It's a good book.
Right, and I wanted to say a couple things about the Newbery medal. There's one winner of that award per year. It's been going on for since the 1940s, I want to say. But only one book wins that award a year to the author of the most distinguished contribution to American literature for children in the year of publication. So you can't be nominated multiple years in a row. And I want to ask you guys if you know did Charlotte's Web win a Newbery Award?
I believe it did.
Do you think it did?
I think it did. The book is sitting over on a desk right now.
It did. It actually did not.
It did not.
Charlotte's Web was not a Newbery Award winner. It was a runner-up in 1953 to a book called Secret of the Andes.
Ooh. Well, Andes, what is the secret?
Yes, please tell us the secret, Andes.
The secret is Charlotte's Web is not good enough for a Newbery Award.
Oh, but it was the runner-up.
I blame that sheep.
But there has been some, like that sheep. There's been some criticism of the Newbery Award that they don't give it to books that kids go after. They just go to books that adults think are good for kids.
I can see that.
And I guess I could see that with this book. But I mean, it is a good book. And I think that it would be good for kids to read it. In fact, I was already thinking when I was reading it, I'm glad that I have this book now. Because when Bruce gets to the point, and Clark, when they get to the point where they can read chapter books, I'm going to be like, hey, check out Maniac Magee. It's a good book. I think it has good lessons and good imagery and themes all the way through it.
And the main protagonist is very, very likable, very pure, very, very relatable.
Oh, yeah. I actually remember when I was a kid, I think one of the things that I loved about Maniac Magee, because I know I read this book more than once back then, is like you're saying, the relatability that you have with him. And at the time, you know, I had certain things going on for my family and all that. And, you know, seeing like the bravery of this kid and how he ran off. And I would almost see that as a reason people might not want kids to read the book. But just thinking of how he ran off and he was on his own, it's pretty good.
I mean, when you get down to it, it's about a homeless child. It's about a homeless
child. Yeah. A homeless child who's amazingly good at all kinds of things for no known reason. He just is very, very athletic, a runner.
A football catcher.
But that could be part of his legend.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you guys, do you guys have any local legends? Do you have any people in your community that were like, that did just like crazy or amazing things at all? Or just like weird things?
I don't really think so. Not that I know of, but I moved around a lot. So
yeah, and I wasn't really raised in a very like tight knit community where we knew everybody. Like, it's easier for like a story with a setting in like a city where everybody knows each other and everybody gets around and or whatever. But I didn't really grow up with any kind of mythical people,
right?
like local legends.
Well,
like what kind of local legends were out in our area?
Well, let me tell you guys. Let me introduce you guys to a man. I don't want to change his name. I want to give him a shout out if he ever listens to this. His name is Shannon. And it's actually a kind of a legendary thing because he was just weird and crazy. He did the weirdest things. Like he put a record player in his car. To black out his windows, he just painted the inside of them. What else did he do? He had a Citation like you, Harold.
Oh, the Citation! 1982 Chevy Citation.
Yeah, he had a Citation. That's when he blacked out the windows with the paint. He had a pet chicken named El Berserko. And his mom was also legendary. She had a very particular way of speaking, and she actually had catchphrases in our school because of the weird things that she would say. And the only way I could say it is in this voice. So she would basically yell out, "Shannon, how's your hair?" Like asking him if he was looking okay, or "Shannon, turn down that DC talk. That's straight from the devil." Because any type of rock music was from the devil. So
DC talk. Oh man, DC talk being of the devil.
Yeah, a song.
They're a Christian band.
DC stands for Decent Christians.
Yeah.
So
not even Christians can decide what's good and what's not.
So so that is the legend that was in our school and our area. He'd play basketball and he'd just throw up these shots that you were like, why would you even do that? And they would go in. It was the weirdest thing in the world.
Okay, now we're talking. Now that's something legendary. Everything else is just like eccentric. This here is legendary skill.
So he once caught a carp with his teeth. It was crazy.
I mean, I would believe that.
Well, that's what you got to start doing.
I wish I knew
things
more stories like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. These tall tales that get taller with the telling.
Well, Maniac Magee had legends of his own. The story before the story is people say that he was born in a dump. They claim that his stomach was a cereal box and his heart was a sofa spring. They also claim that he kept an 8-inch cockroach on a leash and that rats stood guard over him when he slept. And also, if you sprinkled salt on the ground when he was running through, in 2 or 3 blocks, he'd be running as slowly as everybody else. One of the amazing things about him is that he runs, and these myths about him and these stories come from this idea of this place that they're in. And there's an East End and a West End in this town, 2 Mills, Pennsylvania. And they have stories about him that have gone on since, obviously, the story's being told from a time later, probably when he's already an adult. But the kids all still have legends there. There's a little rhyme that girls will sing when they're flicking, what's it called?
A jump rope?
Jump rope. And they say, "Maniac, maniac, he's so cool. Maniac, maniac, don't go to school. Runs all night, runs all right. Maniac, maniac, kissed a bull." And there's questions as to whether it was really a bull that he kissed. And sometimes when this is happening, one of the girls holding the rope is from the East End and one's holding the other side from the West End. And there's an important reason for that we get to in a little bit here. I liked how they end that before the story, how you don't know which parts are true and which parts are just made up. And the way he says to decide is just run your hand under your movie seat and be very, very careful not to let the facts get mixed up with the truth. which is, again, there were so many things in this book that kind of like play into our current social climate. It's pretty wild.
Right, and they talk about how if one girl at one end of the jump rope is from the east side and the girl on the other side is from the west side, and that's a good place to start if you're looking for Maniac Magee's legacy.
Yeah, yep.
As kind of the characterization of what he brought to the table with his being.
And this is mainly because he just didn't see what everybody else saw in this town when he got there. Now, Maniac was born in a regular house, and he was born not too far away from this town of Two Mills. One day, his parents left when he was 3 years old, and they were involved in a trolley crash over top of the Schuylkill River, and they ended up dying. So he became an orphan as a toddler. Now, Josh, you said you had something about that.
I looked up to find out if there was a trolley accident, and I based it on the year that it was written, and so he would have been... I based it in like the 80s, so I tried to find a trolley accident from that time period. And there was a trolley accident on January 26, 1987. No one was killed, though. But if you look it up, there's a super 80s news report on YouTube that you can watch, and it's awesome. But there was a crash in 2014 into that was basically exactly like the book. So
2014?
2014, correct.
The P&W high-speed trolley is where Maniac's parents died.
Which is a real trolley line, but it was absorbed by the greater train system of Philadelphia. So basically, Philadelphia took it over. It's like SP, I'm not sure. It's the public transit of Philadelphia.
Well, at this time, he wasn't known as Maniac. He was just known as Jeffrey Lionel Magee, and he went to live with his Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan, and they were strict Catholics that hated each other but would not get a divorce because they were strict Catholics. So as time goes by, when he's living there, they have 2 bathrooms, 2 TVs, 2 toasters. If it's possible to have 2 of them, they had 2 of them. And if they could have had 2 of Jeffrey, they would have had 2 of him as well, but they split him up instead. So one night he would have dinner with Aunt Dot, and the next night he would have dinner with Uncle Dan. These 2 people never talked to each other, and basically you'd have to know that if they're not giving any love to each other, then they're probably not giving any love to this kid because they're so broiled in their hatred for each other that how could they possibly?
So right, and this is the first example of Jeffrey's reaction to division between 2 people, or two groups of people.
Yep.
Whatever. But he's forever being kind of forced in the position between 2 divided entities, I suppose, and that's a common theme that we're going to see here.
Yep. And it doesn't really say anything about him not liking either one of them. I'm sure he liked both of them just fine.
And he wanted them to get along.
Yeah, that's really all he wanted. He spent
that's why
8
he ran
years
away.
Like that. Yep, 8 years like that till he was 11 years old. And there was a chorus or a spring show at school.
like a elementary school concert.
Yep, like an elementary school concert
where they shuffle all the kids in and force them to sing something.
Yeah, whether they can sing or not.
Every kid has to do it.
Oh yeah,
it is a rite of passage in public elementary school.
Were you part of the Christmas one in Mackler Sodden?
I distinctly remember I played the role of the nuisance in in our class's Christmas play that year in 4th grade.
Yep. No,
which was a fitting role for me because I remember back in 4th grade I was like an insufferable class clown that was frequently getting in trouble for trying to make my class laugh.
I was a pretty quiet kid at the time. I didn't do a whole lot of that, so I ended up in the chorus. I remember because I really wanted one certain part. It was an elf, and actually had speaking lines and everything. And I actually wanted the part because I had a crush on the girl that was playing opposite that guy. So it wasn't for good reason. And it wasn't like I was like, I want to be an actor.
I mean, it's the only reason you want to do anything.
Right. It is a common motivation. Well, both the aunt and uncle had to sit in the same auditorium for this. There was no way to get around it. They couldn't have two spring shows.
Right,
and
one show, both of them had to attend.
Yep. One sat on one side, the other sat on the other side. And they were singing a song called Talk to the Animals. And it's unclear as to whether Jeffrey was screaming the whole time or if he didn't start until it got towards the end. But when all the noise went down, he was screaming with his face red and cords in his neck. And he was just saying, talk, 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 will you just talk? And that was the birth scream of the legend is how it puts it. And he started running. He took a few steps down off the stage, jumped out, ran out into the starry night, and he was never again to live in that house, and he never again went to school after that. Which makes me think that this book, even though it's written in the 90s, because Jerry Spinelli would have been older at that point already, I feel like...
Technically, it was written in the 80s,
right,
the late 80s, and then published in 1990.
I still feel like the time period of the book is meant to be the 70s.
It just kind of feels like it, doesn't it?
It feels like the 70s.
But there's something that comes around later in the book that kind of puts it... I don't know if we want to jump ahead that far.
Yeah,
but,
we can get back to it.
There's a very specific thing that kind of dates. It's around the character of Grayson and something that he did in his past. Mm-hmm. But that's not until later on. I don't know if we want to touch on it now, just so we can talk about the time period that it's in.
Well, what time period does it put it in? You don't have to talk about the specific thing, but just kind of...
Well, Grayson talks about his time playing in minor league baseball and striking out Willie Mays in his last at-bat before moving up to the MLB.
Okay.
And that would have happened in 1951.
Oh.
And it specifically says that Grayson was 27 in 1951.
Okay.
And he played but we can come back to that later, or we can try to pin a time period based on that.
Yeah. We can come back to it later.
Right. Let's do that.
All right.
Back to the birth of the legend.
Yep. Maniac Magee, who was Jeffrey at that time, he started out in Hollidaysburg, and where he stopped was 2 Mills. And apparently this is about 200 miles distance. And it takes a while on foot, but it took a whole year for him to get there. And he was a legendary runner. That's one of his legends. So they don't know what happened during that time. It's the lost year in his legend, because from that time to that time, no one knows. And no one knows why he stayed.
From Hollidaysburg all the way to 2 Mills. 2 Mills, by the way, is loosely based on Jerry Spinelli's hometown, Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is still in the Philadelphia area. But it's across the Schuylkill River from... Schuylkill? It's a weirdly spelled
Schuylkill?
SCHUYLKIOL.
I feel like people would just call it the Schuylkill River.
Schuylkill.
Not being from
people, Pennsylvania, I don't
listeners in Pennsylvania are yelling at us right now.
Yeah. It's Schuylkill!
It's Schuylkill!
I'm not even going to try because I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want anybody to throw a battery at me or something.
It's the Stanford River. You can't tell that's Stanford.
I have Pennsylvania family, but they're all in Pittsburgh. Which is on the other side of the state from Philadelphia.
And Pennsylvania is a long, boring state. Sorry,
it's a long, mountainous state, too.
Oh, my goodness. When we went to Connecticut, it felt like it took us 3 days to drive through Pennsylvania. There were points where you'd go, there'd be an exit, and I swear it was 30 miles to the next exit. It was crazy.
Just long, winding, hilly mountain roads mixed with the longest damn tunnels.
Yep.
Yeah. All that driving around in Pennsylvania, sorry.
So he was born in Bridgeport, which is right across the river from 2 Mills. And there's that possibility. Maybe that's why he stayed. He could have just been tired of being on the move. But most people think that the reason he stayed was because he made a friend. The few people that remember him from that first day, they remember one specific thing about him. And it has something to do with the way the town is. The town's kind of obviously not very close with each other. These people that live there don't get really close with each other, and they're not used to strangers saying hi. And he had ran past some people and just said hi, and it kind of knocked him back a little bit. Like, what? Nobody just says hi to anybody. I like the description here. A couple people truly remember, and here's what they saw. A scraggly little kid jogging toward them, the soles of both sneakers hanging by their hinges and flopping open like dog tongues each time they came up from the pavement. And I really like some of the imagery that he has in this book, because, I mean, you think about that, and I don't even know how you could possibly be running on shoes like that. You'd think you'd trip. You know, you'd drag them on the ground and just trip, but...
Yeah, it is such good writing, and Spinelli has a really good way with words, and is very oftentimes folksy as fuck.
Oh yeah, super folksy.
Just my way of saying it. I'm going to chime in whenever I have an underlined passage of something that I thought was just folksy as fuck as we go along.
Yeah, and so there are some long sentences too. I mean, he does not give a shit about writing a long sentence. There, one sentence that I read later in the book, I'm reading it and I'm like, this is not a paragraph. Those are commas. Like, holy shit.
What I liked about this section is that he showed both the legend as well as the truth. So that he's oh, some people say this, some people say that, but that's not true, because there was only a few people that remember it, and this is the truth. So that's what I liked. Is like, it does show both sides of Jeffrey, both Maniac the legend and Jeffrey the boy.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's a long running theme of legend versus reality, and how the two meet and sometimes clash.
So the first person that actually stopped and talked to him was a girl named Amanda Beale, and she was walking to school carrying a suitcase, and this stuck out to him because he's a kid that ran away from home. He's out there being free and not worried about parents or authority figures, and not worried about the standard things that hold us all down in the world. And that's one of the things I liked about him, is he's truly free out there, even though most of us would not want to live that way, because his freedom comes at the cost of not really having much of anything, including friends or family or anything at this point.
Well, yeah, he's a homeless kid.
Yep.
So
what it introduces her with, her first thought is, who is this white stranger kid? And what was he doing in the East End where almost all the kids were black? And why was he saying that? Because he said hi to her. She's friendly, so she says hi back to him. And Jeffrey asked if she was running away, which threw her off.
Because she was carrying a suitcase with her.
Yep.
So it's
and
not
the suitcase. Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, it's not an unnecessary question. She was carrying a suitcase.
Yeah, right. Well, but to think, though, like, if you're running away, I don't know if I'd carry a big old suitcase with me if I were trying to run away. You can't. It seems like it'd be hard to get somewhere with that. You'd be like, I have to pack some stuff into a backpack. And that actually says something, too. Why doesn't she have a backpack? Because she's just carrying books. They're all her books in this suitcase.
It's all her books that she's taking with her to school so that they don't get ruined by her younger siblings and dog.
Yep.
Who like to crayon all over her things, and the dog will chew on them, so she's protecting her book collection.
Yep.
Which is another thing about this story, is that there is a big time appreciation for reading and literacy and books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Maniac loves to read. Even this right here, when she says books, he's like, what, books? And so she opens...
It's probably what made this story Newbery bait.
Right, yeah, they're like, oh yeah, we want this one because they're talking about books.
I just love to read.
We need to give Spinelli the award. When I saw how much time he talked about books, I got rock hard. Damn Newberries.
The Newbery Committee. They're all hard for literacy.
This one has some pretty good imagery to it, too, because when she sits down and opens up the suitcase so he can look at the books, it describes them as rocks in a stream. And everybody else that was on their way to school were just like flowing around them, which I thought was a cool image for him to put in there. And he appreciated all the different books, too, in that.
My only thought was, if this was such a weird thing to see, why weren't other people gawking?
Because she lives there. So other people know she's walking up there with a suitcase full of books.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. There's a white kid in the East End. And they're
yeah.
Why are they not stopping and staring?
Maybe they're just trying to ignore him and get around him.
Yeah, that's true. I could see that.
They're all anxious to get to school.
Yep. Yep, they even call out to Amanda that she's going to be late for school, and this is not something that's normal for Amanda. She gets to school on time at all times.
But not that day.
Not that day. He offered to carry the books for her. She said no. She's really suspicious of him. What is this white kid doing here? Why is he so interested in my books? And she's looking at him, and he's got these flap-soled sneakers. He's ratty clothes. He probably doesn't look too clean at this point, because I don't know where he'd be taking baths other than in a river. And they tell you right here that at this time in this story, the east end of the city was blacks, the west end was whites. And she's like, I know you're not from this end, because he tried to tell her that he lived over there.
Yeah, and she's calling him out.
Yep.
I know you're not from here, because this is the black half of town.
Right, yeah, there's no way you live around here. And he tells her, well, I'm from Bridgeport. And she asks why he's not there, and he says, well, where I'm from isn't where I am. So, and she tells him to go ask his mother and father, and then she starts walking. Obviously, she wouldn't have known anything about that. He doesn't really say anything to her about his parents. He doesn't take offense to it or anything like that. She's heading to school. He keeps asking, can I have a book? Let me borrow one. She's like, no. And he's just annoying the shit out of her, asking for a book. He asks for her name. He says he'll take the shortest one. He just wants a book. He won't leave her alone. Finally, she throws a book at him. And she's just like, here. And she tells him that she lives at 728 Sycamore. And she also tells him, you can't come there. You can't even be here. So, I mean, she's telling him, like, what are you doing here, man? And he is not getting it. He does not get that.
Yeah, it's a foreign concept to him.
Yeah, he has no
because
idea.
Because he's always been able to just go where he wants to go.
Yep. So the idea that he can't
pretty
be
much
here...
He's pretty much stayed away from people at large, so he doesn't know their ways.
Right.
He just roams around on his own and never really interacts with people.
But at the same time...
So he's kind of not picking up social cues.
Right, and at the same time, all he's seeing is people. Like, for him, he's just seeing people because he's been away from everybody for this time, no one knows where he's been. Clearly, he hasn't gotten picked up by any authorities or anything and been told what's right and wrong now. He's just seeing people, human interaction.
Yeah.
So she threw this book at him. It came flapping like a wounded duck and fell at his feet. Again, the imagery is just great in this book.
Folksy.
Yep, yeah. That's folksy, yep.
Great use of simile. That I guess this is the term for it.
Right. He made a few other appearances that day during a football practice during recess. The star quarterback of the local football team threw a huge pass, and it was going towards their best receiver. And just as he was going to catch it, boom. It was gone, and there was just this skinny little white kid running up the field with the ball, and he gets to the end, turns around, tosses it up, and punts it right back into the receiver's hands.
Yeah,
and, farther than the quarterback had thrown it.
Yeah, farther than the quarterback had thrown it. And the thing everybody noticed, but they had to compare stories after school, was he did all of it with one hand, because in his other hand, he was carrying a book.
Can I say I just absolutely love the nickname of this receiver?
Oh, yeah.
His name is James Down, but his nickname was Hands.
Yep, Hands Down.
They called him Hands Down.
Yep.
Have that,
which is hands down a great nickname.
I have
for a
that in
ball
my
player.
notes as well. Put hands down is a great name.
It is for sure.
But this is where the legend of Maniac Magee really starts taking off, because he's starting to show his feats of wonder.
Well, I'm going to say, is this a legend or is this a true thing that happened? What do you think?
It seems true enough. I mean, that's a pretty wild story for a bunch of people to have actually seen, and they're all football players. So when they see it, that's something amazing. They're all practicing all day long, and then they see this kid run up with all of his clothes falling apart, his shoes are barely hanging on, and here he is catching the ball with one hand, and we know he had the book. If he's running, he couldn't have the book tucked in his pants.
Yeah, they probably would have fell out because his pants were rags.
Right. So after that, he ends up at this address of this man named Finsterwald. And we never meet Finsterwald, but he is apparently the scariest person in town. Everybody's afraid of him. And I think everybody has some similar thing in some way, where there was a neighbor or somebody that was just a grump that you knew better than to get on their bad side. So you kind of stayed away as a kid. You didn't want to get too close to them. Afraid they're going to
Here's
yell
one
at
of
you
my
or scream
first
at you.
underlined passages of Spinelli being folksy as fuck with his simile. Kids stayed away from Finsterwalds the way old people stay away from Saturday afternoon matinees at a $2 movie.
Yup.
They avoid him like the plague.
Oh, for sure.
I was going to ask you guys, do you remember any specific, scary yards, Sandlot type yards that you guys, were nobody ever, they just talked about it in whispers? For me, there was there's this brick building in Elkton, and everybody's like, oh, that's where the witch lives. Nobody actually, I didn't know, but all the kids, we just said, oh, that's where the witch lives. But, yeah, nobody knew her or anything. I think she just kind of kept to herself and, just a legend.
Just about everywhere I lived growing up, there were places where people said this or that happened. There was a murder there, or just crazy stuff like that. And so that's what I mean, kind of, is everybody stays away. There's places you stay away from, most likely just because they look creepy. I imagine maybe this guy lives in the dead house.
Ooh, callback.
So basically, the way people look at it is whenever you see some raggedy guy with nicotine stains on his fingers walking around town, the kids believe that kid had wandered onto this Finsterwald's property. And as teenagers or high schoolers are wont to do sometimes, there were some dickheads, and they had some poor kid, and they threw him over the fence into Finsterwald's yard. And I imagine that even these teenagers, these older high schoolers, were scared of the yard. That's why they threw him over there, is because they're like, yeah, this is scary as shit. We're going to throw this kid over there.
And that adds to the horror of getting close to the yard, because there might be high schoolers there to throw you over the fence into this terrifying Finsterwald place.
Right. So this kid's over there in the yard. Arnold Jones is his name. No one ever knows what happens to him later on.
Allegedly.
They say. Allegedly. But they start hearing his teeth rattling, and they're all laughing. They think it's great. And then all of a sudden, some raggedy kid comes walking up, and some say that he jumped right over the fence without ever touching it, and others say that he just opened the gate and walked right in. But he picked Arnold Jones up, put him over his shoulder, and walked him out of the yard. Then he took him up and put him on the scarier part of the house, which was the front steps of Finsterwald's. So after this kid wakes up, because he had passed out, and runs off, Maniac just sits down on the steps and starts reading his book. And everybody's just like, what the fuck is he doing?
When Arnold came to and discovered that he was on the front porch, he took off like a horsefly from a swatter.
They call him, they saw this kid, cool times 10, stretch out on the forbidden steps and open his book to read. So, you know,
oh
again,
man, I want to be cool times 10.
I know, cool times 10. What the hell, man? I mean, that's
Great use of words.
more of this just legendary action by this kid, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So then local in town on this side of town. Now at this point, I believe we are onto the west side of town. Okay, so we're in the white area of town. But there's this family, the Pickwells, and this lady, she whistles so loud that she just grabs the attention of everybody. Her kids will come for miles, they say. And they are never late for dinner.
Right.
And
the whistle wasn't loud. It was just very well known.
Yep, it was
the
a
whistle
well-known
wasn't loud.
whistle.
It wasn't screechy. It was a simple 2-note job, one high note, one low. But it was famous for bringing every Pickwell from wherever they were in town, including anybody who wanted to come to dinner, apparently.
Yep. Well, and these people were nice people. They were always helping people out.
Mm-hmm.
They were
They opened up their dinner table to strangers and people in need.
Yep.
Yeah.
Giving a hand.
They were kind
And
people.
After dinner, someone asked who that kid was, and no one knew. No one knew why this kid was there, and they ran outside and they looked up and they saw him running away, and he was running on the railroad. But he wasn't running on the ties, and he wasn't running next to it. He was running on the rail of the train track, which is one of the images that always stuck out to me. That was one of the things that I always remembered, was him running on the rails. In fact, I believe when I was telling Josh about this book and that we should read it, that was one of the things I picked out specifically. And in fact, when I searched for it, because I couldn't remember the name of the book, I searched for book about kid who runs on rail. And that's how I got Maniac Magee. That came up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is definitely the part that definitely sticks out in my mind, and I believe that's why, is because you told me about that part.
Yeah, it was one of the main things I remembered about him. And then the last time he was spotted on that first day was at a Little League game. Well, after a Little League game had ended, and the pitcher, McNabb, had struck out everyone in the game, and he was wanting to just continue it on. McNabb, as he goes further, we kind of see that he's kind of a bully. Maybe not necessarily a bully with intent, but just kind of a bully that is, because he's bigger than everybody else. People are already scared of him. So he just kind of feeds off that and continues to bully.
He's the kid that looks like he's too big to be on the Little League team. He's 5'8". At 12 years old, he's 5'8", over 170 pounds, and he had to bring his birth certificate in to the Little League director to prove his age. And so he's a kid that uses his size to his advantage. I'm
currently about 5'9" and weigh at about 170, so he's roughly my size at 12. That's terrifying.
Yeah, that is terrifying.
Yeah, if you're a regular size 12-year-old kid, yeah, that is a giant.
I knew a kid named Jordan when I was in 6th grade, and he was like 6 foot in 6th grade. He was a huge kid. There were a couple of them down in Linden, couple really tall kids. The only pitch that this guy throws is a fastball, but I mean, he's 5'8", 170 pounds, pitching fastballs at 12-year-olds. Yeah, I imagine that he struck a lot of kids out.
Throw him the heater.
Yeah, but the game is over, and he's just he's forcing the kids from both teams to line up and get up to the plate and try to hit his fastballs so he can increase his strikeout record.
Yeah, just building more on that, like, I can do what I want. And these kids are, you got to think, I mean, 5'8", 170 pounds or not, I mean, you've got kids from both of these Little League teams, and they're in complete fear of this one kid when it's like, I've seen that there's like some kind of calculator you can use online to find out how many 5-year-olds you could take before you get taken down. And so it just easily, these kids shouldn't be afraid of him, but then again, they're all going to be alone at some point, so they don't want to mess with McNabb.
Right. Nobody wants to be the first one to make a move.
Nope. So, yeah, he's just throwing the ball, and all of a sudden this kid in raggedy clothes comes walking up to the plate, and McNabb says, nope, you can't play, you're not part of the team. So he grabs a hat off one of the other kids and just starts popping these balls out into the outfield. Couple of home runs way out in the outfield.
Yeah, the first one is a line drive right to McNabb's head.
Right at the kid.
Like it nips the bill of his cap and sent it spinning like a flying saucer out to shortstop.
Folks.
And the second one went out to center field, I believe, deep in left center field. But then every pitch after that was a home run.
Yep. And the other kids are at first.
Well, not every pitch. I take that back. The last one, McNabb starts throwing it at Maniac.
Yep. Yeah, he gets mad and starts throwing it at him. And the
throws
kids
it at his head and calls it strike one. Throws it at his belt, at his stomach. Jeffrey's dodging them.
Yep.
But he's still calling them strikes. But the third one, he backs up and hits another home run off of one that was aimed at his feet.
Well, he bunts it. It was a frog.
That's not the one that he.
Oh no, that's
not the one that he bunts. No.
Yep.
After the sequence of him, there's a very good reason that I'm going in depth on this. But after he tries to bean Maniac and fails, he tells the other kids that he's got to go take a leak, and he's gone for a while. And they figured that he's a big kid. So his whiz would probably last longer than a regular kid's, might even make the creek rise. This imagery of peeing so much that it makes the creek rise, it got me in trouble when we read this in 4th grade, because our class was supposed to draw a scene from the book that we had read so far. And I chose to draw John McNabb peeing into the creek and making the water level rise. And I don't remember if my parents got called in or not, but I certainly got a talking to from Mrs. Post because I also drew the penis.
Oh my!
With the pee coming out of it, just a little little U shape from him, but distinctly a penis. Just a crude drawing of this John McNabb kid peeing into the river.
Outstanding.
But here's the thing, though. I'm not saying that you should have. I don't know that you should get in too much trouble for that either, though, because, you're in 4th grade. Do you think you drew the penis with malice? Or do you think that you drew the penis?
That's what penises are for.
Yeah.
Penises are for peeing.
I feel like as a kid, you're not, as a little kid like that, 3rd grade, 4th grade, you're still pretty young. I feel like you're not necessarily if you draw a dick, it's not like when you're in high school and you're scratching a dick into a desk or something to get the rise out of people.
Right.
I feel like you drew the penis because you're 4th grade and you're like, I pee out of my penis, and obviously, so does this guy, assumably.
For whatever reason, the imagery of making the creek rise by peeing into it struck some kind of chord with me enough that I drew that. Weird that I drew something that John McNabb did as opposed to anything that Maniac did. But,
right.
There you go.
Well, yeah,
but. He comes back from the creek and he's got his ball, the ball in his glove, and that he had a demon's gleam in his eye. He wound up, fired, the ball headed for the plate, and what's this? A leg ball. It's got legs, long legs, pinwheeling toward the plate. It wasn't a ball at all. It was a frog.
And this is where Maniac makes a decision. He doesn't. I think, as I'm thinking about it, if this guy is throwing these fastballs, these really hard, flat fastballs, I don't think there's anything that you could do to hopefully save this frog. But for the sake of the story, Maniac's
I was going to say
that.
Even though he bunts it, I'm pretty sure that frog would still be hurt in some way, possibly knocked unconscious.
If not
killed.
But it doesn't get killed. He bunts it. It's a perfect bunt. The ball goes up the third baseline.
Air quotes.
And he starts running, and he hits the first base, and McNabb goes to run to grab the ball. And instead of hopping over the foul line, it hops back over his foot, and he's chasing this frog now. And Maniac makes it all the way around and gets a home run off a bunt. And then he just keeps running. He hits the home plate and grabs his book and keeps running.
Mm-hmm. And he became legendary for hitting the world's first inside the park bunted frog ball.
Yep.
It was unbefroggable.
Unbefroggable. I just hit, but unbefroggable. I just hit that as well. Just looking through it, like, oh, unbefroggable. So that was actually how he got the name Maniac. That was when people started calling him Maniac. They were buzzing. It was buzzing all over town. This kid's carrying a book. He's got flap-soled sneakers. He intercepted a football. He rescued Arnold Jones. And then he knocked this frog ball and got a home run off of it. And they're saying kid's got to be a maniac. And, you know, it just starts getting around. Next thing you know, they're all just calling him Maniac. And everybody else called him that except for Amanda Beale. She didn't call him Maniac.
She's the only one he told his actual name to.
Yep.
So far.
And he has a name now. He has a legendary name, but he doesn't have an address yet. He actually is sleeping in the deer shed at the zoo. And he eats the carrots and apples and old hamburger buns that are there. So this is, again, talking about that, like, oh, man, he's free. He gets to do whatever he wants. But, yeah, he's eating the scraps that the deer are eating to try and get by. He read the book. He reads it quickly. He gets through it, and then he reads it again, and he means to take it back, but he's just can't stop reading this book.
Well, I want to talk about this book.
What?
Do you know about the book?
Children's Crusade?
Yes. Do you know about
I
the
have not looked into it.
So the Children's Crusade was a part of the civil rights movement. It was used in Birmingham, Alabama, actually to desegregate the city and the schools. And it was kids and teens were trained in nonviolent protest. So sit-ins and, you know, going to protests, but nonviolent. And so this book itself is a civil rights, is a part of the civil rights that are being taught in the book as well. It teaches Jeffrey more about equality and how he can do things peacefully, non-violently, rather than fighting.
Although it does make you wonder why he was so shocked by the presence of segregation that he comes upon.
Well, I mean, he's already come upon the segregation, and maybe that's why he reads the book so many times.
He was kind of confronted about it, but he still wasn't quite getting it.
Right.
Well,
when Amanda was saying, "What are you doing in the black side of town?"
Right.
It was a book of the past, so he could have been like, "Well, I thought they already got through this. What's going on? Why is this still like this? If they already fought against this?"
Right, presumably this book is telling the story of how they fought it. So, yeah, to him,
but later on, it's like his views on race are a little bit more detached than they probably would be if you were reading a book about the Children's Crusade.
Right. Yes, he's still a little detached from it.
So it's curious.
So he runs around during the day. He keeps the book in perfect condition. And then he comes to something that gets in his way about it. McNabb is pissed that he beat him, and he didn't like having that on his record, and he figured that beating up a kid is the same as striking him out. So he had a gang of guys that called themselves the Cobras, and they were going to go find Maniac Magee, and they were going to beat him up. They had heard that he hung around the park and the tracks, and they go out there looking for him, and on a Saturday, they happen to find him, and they start chasing him. But, you know, Maniac is a crazy good runner. So he keeps running. He's getting out there. They're throwing rocks at him. They peg him a couple times with these rocks, but it doesn't really stop him. And how they found him, he was actually running on the rail again. And they had thought that was just a story. But no, they see him. He was actually doing that.
It wasn't a trick.
Yep.
It was true.
He comes past the house where he ate the spaghetti. he thought he could go there, but he was like, oh man, I gotta keep going. He's moving around, darting around, and he starts running over a creek, and he ends up basically running as fast as he can, seeing a blur of faces, and he noticed that all of a sudden they were getting faint. They were going in the background. He couldn't hear them anymore. And they had stopped at a street called Hector Street. And what he didn't realize that they knew was that Hector Street was the barrier. That's where the white kids didn't cross Hector Street into the East End, and the black kids didn't cross Hector Street into the West End. But Maniac, he ran right across. He didn't think anything of it. But it's getting close to, it's later in the day at this point, and they're like, no, we're not going to do that. But they figured he's going to get the crap kicked out of him when he's over there. But he didn't know any of this. He goes in and he runs into a kid. Almost runs into a kid. He had to stop. And this kid walks towards him, and he takes a step back. And this guy comes forward again. He steps back again. And finally, he just turned and he started walking away, and the kid jumped in front of him, and he's eating a candy bar. And Maniac tells the kid, hey, I'm looking for Sycamore Street. And the guy's like, yeah, okay, I know where that is. And he's like, okay, can you tell me? And they describe it as stone being softer than the kid's glare. This kid's like, no, I'm not telling you. And other kids start saying, waste him, get him Mars. And they go into telling us that, this kid is another legend, kind of, in this part of town, Mars Bar Thompson. And he gets called Mars Bar because he's always got Mars Bar candy bars that he's eaten, and he offers a bite to Maniac, and Maniac chomps down on a bite like, yeah, sure, takes it, and didn't flip it over to take the end that hadn't been bitten off, didn't do anything like that, just took a bite off of it, like, thanks, man, this is great. And all the kids are blown away because this white kid just took a bite off of a candy bar that a black kid was eating, and he didn't even try to eat the other end. And they're just like, you just don't do that. And almost in this way
not only that, it wasn't the fact that he was black. It was because it was Mars bars. Nobody ate Mars bar except for Mars.
What?
Right. But I mean, it even says not only that, but white kids just didn't put their mouths where black kids had theirs, be it soda bottles, spoons, or candy bars. So, I mean, that's definitely...
but what I think he's pointing out the fact of this legend is that you don't mess with Mars, especially you don't mess with Mars bars.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, part of that is true, yeah. But also, it harkens back to the fact that there were separate drinking fountains for blacks and whites.
Right.
Separate pools swimming pools that they could use or couldn't use.
Oh,
right.
Yes, segregation it's still very real. I lived in Milwaukee, which is the most segregated city in America. So I truly understand how that works.
At this point, what it is it's not enforced. It's not something that's enforced. It's ingrained. It's been so ingrained in our society for so many years. Yeah. Decades.
It's not official, but it survived.
It survives in its own way, and gets held on to by both sides of it sometimes. So he's like, what the fuck is this kid doing? So Mars Bars thumps him in the chest, like, what the fuck, man? You think you're a badass or something, Maniac's like, I didn't know. What's going on here? You offered me a bite of your candy bar, and now you're pissed at me? What the fuck, He doesn't know. It even says, I don't know, 1 minute you're yelling at me, and the next minute you're giving me a bite of your candy bar. What's up, dude? I don't know what's happening. And so he tells Maniac to tell him he's bad, and he says, it's none of your business, none of my business if you're bad or not. Let your mother or father tell you. And that's just this kid's just flabbergasted, what is up with this fucking guy?
And it's because Maniac doesn't understand slang. He hasn't been around people, so he doesn't understand that bad is a good thing. If you're bad, you're bad. He's just like, no, if you're bad, your parents will tell you if you're a bad person. I'm not one to judge, so I don't know.
He's getting around this intimidation by just like sheer obtuseness.
Yep.
being ignorant that he should be afraid of this bad dude.
Right.
Who very much gets by on his reputation of being a bad dude.
So a lot of Mars Bar.
I've noticed that a lot of Maniac's legends revolve around how he got the better of known entities within the town. Like you got Brian Dennehy, the quarterback. He caught a pass from him that was intended for hands down. Another dude famous for his qualities. He takes on the Finsterwald Yard, and he takes on Mars Bar, and John McNabb, the big kid who throws fastballs, and he's just taken all of these existing local legends down a peg.
And none of it's mean-spirited. He's not doing it just to take down these local legends. It's like, I think that when he went to play baseball or when he went to hit the ball, he just wanted to hit the ball. When he caught the football, he just wanted to catch the football. He wanted to punt it, you know? He didn't want to see some kid get tossed into a yard. He could tell this kid's getting picked on. He's like, what the hell are you guys doing? You know, and just helped him out. He isn't doing it with malice. And even with Mars, he's not doing it with malice. He's just like, you know, I mean, can't we just be friends, kinda? You know, like, why do we have a problem? Well, Mars grabs the book out of his hand, and Maniac ends up grabbing it back from him, but one of the pages gets ripped out. And at this point, Maniac's asking for the book back, or the page, and Mars tells him, you know, take it, Fishbelly, which is a name that comes up, but he calls him Fishbelly, and everything is quiet. Nobody knows what to do. And all of a sudden, a broom comes down in between the two of them. And this lady is like, you know, I'll take it. She takes the page from Mars Bar and gives it back or she tells him to give it back to Maniac. And so he does, because even though he's a tough-ass 11-year-old, this lady's got a broom, and she's young enough that she's like, I'll fuck you up, boy. You know, and so he's like, oh, shit.
It talks about how Mars Bar was intimidating towards all the kids, even the high schoolers and old ladies, and he could stop traffic with his super slow dip stride slump shuffle.
Oh, yeah.
But he could not stand up against an East End lady in her prime.
Nope. Nope, she had it up on him.
Which that whole reputation of, like, you don't mess with a black mama,
yep,
or you don't mess with with a black woman, they will take you out.
Yep. So he ends up giving the page back, and the lady's looking, and she's like, you better get on, boy, where you belong, you know, just get out of here, you know. And he's like, I don't, you know, I'm okay. And so he just walks away from there.
Well, actually, he stood there for a minute.
Yeah, he did stand there for a minute.
It said there was something he felt like doing, and maybe he would have, but the lady turned and went back inside her house and shut the door. So he walked away. I think he just wanted to hug her. I think he wanted to hug her and be like, thank you. Thank you for saving me.
So now he's upset because he's borrowed this book from Amanda. He's kept it in pristine condition through all his adventures. And as he was going to take it back to her, a page has been ripped from it. And he is trying to figure out how to fix it. He's thinking, you know, he's flattening it out, and he just knows it's crumpled. And so he's looking around. He's just going slowly now at this point. He wasn't really in a hurry to find her. And he runs into Mars Bar again. And at this point, Mars Bar is kind of going at him. He wants the book again. He's trying to stick to this whole same spiel he was doing before. And he gets him backed up against a wall. And then that's when suddenly a bike rolls up, and it's Amanda. And she is not happy to see her book is ripped.
I thought it was funny that she instantly knew that it was Mars that did it.
Oh yeah, she knew it was Mars that did it.
Yeah, she could tell. She knows that he's lying.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. So
and how quickly he was like, it was him. Nah.
It's like Clark.
Like, he knew what was coming.
Every time something happens, I can watch Clark do something wrong, and I'll be like, Clark, and he'll go, Bruce did it. And I'm like, you little liar.
should probably preface to any listeners who may not be familiar, Bruce and Clark are Harold's sons.
Yes.
Who are awesomely named Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent.
Yes.
in case you don't know his family tree.
Yeah, people seem to like that. I'm glad they do, because I questioned it after we named them. I'm like, did I do something wrong? But no, everybody seems to like it.
Are people gonna laugh? Or people think it's gonna be weird? Yeah, no, it's like everyone who
they're
hears
good, strong names.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Bruce and
But
Clark.
anyways.
People don't walk around calling me Harold Fred, so I mean, it's,
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so she's mad because, she does everything she can to not have people ruin her books, and here this guy ruins her book. She tears Mars Bar a new one, and all the high schoolers that are playing basketball across the street are laughing their asses off at this kid getting his ass torn out by this little girl. So Maniac tells her we can fix it, and she asks if he wants to come to her house. And this is where Maniac comes in and gets to meet the Beale family, who are some very nice people that, the mom is busy at this point cleaning crayon off the TV and whatever else the kids have drawn on. And she knows his first name is Jeffrey. She asks for his last name, which is when we get the Magee. And Mrs. Beale is like, yeah, I'm busy right now. Hold on. Because she was introducing Jeffrey or Maniac to her mother. And so her mom starts telling him about how she came home and she said this and she said that. And Amanda's getting all embarrassed, like, come on, Mom, I didn't say all that,
Yeah,
Which
Amanda's
really,
told her mom about Jeffrey.
Yep,
already.
yep. And she really didn't say much. She didn't say anything specific about him, but she just didn't want her mom to be saying anything like, stop, I don't want you to know, I don't want him to know I was talking. He meets her brother and sister, Hester and Lester. Hester is 4 and Lester is 3. And these kids are wild ones. So,
wild children, yes.
Yep, wild children. But it's perfect for
We
Maniac.
already know that they crayon up Amanda's books. She has to protect her books from them, so they have a reputation already.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get into the house for the first time, they're in the next room breaking glass jars.
Yep.
while Mom is distracted cleaning up crayon off the TV screen. So these kids are out of control.
Mm-hmm. But it's perfect for Maniac. He goes out and he's out there playing with them, wrestling, having fun. It's all a good time. He's not worried about it. And Dad gets home from his Saturday shift at the tire factory. They eat dinner and they're watching TV, and the 2 kids are riding on his knees, on Maniac's knees there. And later on, he reads Lyle Lyle Crocodile to the 2 little ones, and actually the parents and Amanda sit and listen to him as well. At this point, Mrs. Beale is like, okay, so probably time for you to get home. Your parents are going to be worrying. And he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just got into the car with Dad, Mr. Beale. They start driving down the road, and they only make it a few houses or a couple streets down. They never even make it out of the East End. And Maniac says, oh, I live here. And Mr. Beale's like, I don't necessarily know.
He knows that this white kid doesn't live here.
You don't live here. This is. I know that house has a black family in it, so I know you don't live here. And he kind of his lip starts quivering. He's almost crying, and he basically tells him he lives at the deer shed. And that's when Mr. Beale's like, well, you're coming to live with us. Which
this will not stand.
Yep.
I will not have this nice little kid going and sleeping in a deer pen.
Yeah. So for the first time in a year, Maniac Magee has an address. He even, before going to bed, he gets Amanda's room. Amanda shares a room with Hester and Lester at this point, and Maniac walks downstairs and looks outside and looks at the 728, and he smiles and he says goodnight, and he goes back upstairs. And he lives there for a little while with them. They don't give an extreme amount of time how long he was there, but It's summertime. It's probably end of spring, beginning of summer at this point, and he's there for a while because it gets to the hottest part of summer while he's still living there. He fit in the family, and it was as if he was just part of the family.
Yeah, the one interesting thing is even though he now has a home, he still likes to sleep on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I really like the imagery is lying on a mattress gave him a weird feeling of slowly rising on a scoop of mashed potatoes. That's just... Yeah. I like that. I like that image.
I love that too. I had that underlined as well.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yep, but Maniac is like the perfect kid. He plays with Hester and Lester and read them stories, kept them out of trouble. He takes the dog out, the dog named Bow Wow, takes him out for runs in the early morning, does dishes, does chores without anybody asking him to. And Mrs. Beale calls it the miracle on Sycamore Street that he keeps his bedroom neat.
Yep. Almost as if he isn't even sleeping in the bed, which happens to be the truth.
Because they find out that he doesn't like sleeping on a mattress.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Beale
doesn't like to get too comfortable.
Mrs. Beale's actually able to put her bucket and sponge away because the kids stop drawing on the walls because now they play with Maniac and they get along with him so well that they don't find a need to be destructive at this point anymore.
Amanda can leave her books at home. They find out that Maniac is really good at untying knots.
Yep, he's got a specific talent for untying knots.
A certain set of skills.
Yep, yeah, he's got a very specific set of skills.
Untying knots.
And
running on rails.
He takes baths with the kids, and the kids didn't want to take baths before. It was a huge fight and everything, but he goes up and he takes baths and plays with the toys with the kids and everything, so the whole family's glad because this 4 and 3-year-old probably don't stink all the time anymore. It said the kids, when Amanda stopped taking baths with the kids, they put their hands on Lyle Crocodile and swore they would never take another bath.
They swore on a kid's book.
They swore on a kid's book. Yep.
That they would never take another bath until their older sister joined them again.
Yep. And Mom was able to force them, but it was a battle every time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They'd lock their arms, wouldn't let her get to their armpits and stuff.
Yep.
So
I could just see that in my head. Just those kids, just like chin down, just mean mugging. Super mean mugging their faces, just like scrouched down, like, nah, you ain't getting me clean. Nah. So I like that.
So this is also where we learn that our hero has a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a weakness that I think all three of us would hate to have. I know this food item is a pretty important staple of my diet. And
oh yeah.
During a bath, the kids start screaming downstairs. Mom comes running up, and he's got all these red blotches. Maniac has all these red blotches on his skin, about the size of pepperonis. When they took him to the doctor, he asked what they had for dinner the night before, and they say, well, pizza. And he's like, it can't be the pizza, obviously. And they're like, this would have shown up every time he had pizza. And they're like, you have eaten pizza before, right? And Maniac was like, and everybody was silent and their eyes got wide. And that's how we found out that Maniac Magee was allergic to pizza, which is a strange allergy. It's got to be something in there.
Doesn't truly make sense. Yeah.
Maybe he needs gluten-free foods.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a gluten allergy. It doesn't really make sense. He had spaghetti with the Pickwells.
Yeah.
Right. So
and he eats Zeps. Those have tomatoes and onions.
Zeps. Mm-hmm.
I have
specifically pizza.
I have to take a pill when I eat pizza, but that's
because you're intolerant
of lactose.
Yeah, that's a lactose intolerance. That's not an allergy. It doesn't make you break out in hives, pepperoni hives. So it's kind of a weird addition to the legend.
Could have been the pepperonis. You don't know.
Could have been
the pepperonis. Yeah.
So a Maniac loves this new life. They bought him some new sneakers, so he doesn't have all the floppers going on anymore. He goes out in the early mornings, like you were saying, runs the dog, and he just loves it. Nothing is bad for him. When they go to church on Sunday mornings, he loves how the minister thumps the pulpit, as he'll say, and they all yell amen, and they swing when they're singing in the choir, singing hallelujah and stuff, and it makes him so happy to be there. And nobody gave him a weird look when he was yelling hallelujah, hallelujah, amen and stuff in the church. They're just as happy and laughing and clapping and singing. There's a 4th of July block party where there's grilled food and games and music and all kinds of great stuff going on. And it actually specifically says here that Maniac loved the colors of the East End, the people colors. For the life of him, he couldn't figure why these East Enders called themselves black. He kept looking and looking, and the colors he found were ginger snap and light fudge and dark fudge and acorn and butter rum and cinnamon and burnt orange, but never licorice, which to him was real black. And I
thought that was a really important paragraph to show just how Maniac actually views race. I mean, he doesn't see people as black people. He appreciates the different shades of their brownness, their actual colors of their skin, and
right.
He doesn't see himself as white because his skin isn't literally white. He's got a very literal kind of filter of viewing white and black,
right?
But he doesn't separate them into these darker shades are black and these lighter shades are white, and never the twain shall meet.
Right. He just sees skin tone, and it's not this idea of he doesn't see color, because he does see the color. He does see
right
that people have darker skin or lighter skin, but he definitely doesn't.
That's exactly my thoughts on it too. This is like people who try to say that they're not racist, that they're colorblind. They don't see color. Well, it's not being racist isn't a matter of not seeing color. It's
right.
a matter of appreciating the variations in color. And
he sees colors. He doesn't see race. That is what it is.
Well, and he sees
doesn't
a
see
lot
race.
more colors than...
No, he just doesn't see race. He doesn't see it as a race. He just sees colors. He doesn't.
Yep.
Race is a foreign concept to him, which I think is
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, it's a great concept.
Personally, I think the easiest way to get rid of racism is to not have races.
Right. And not be dividing ourselves into different races. And this is why these themes in this book are why I wish this book had more than 3.3 million copies sold. It's why I think it should be children's curriculum. It makes sense to me that it was our 4th grade curriculum that we read this book, because it just opens up this idea of, hey, can't figure why people call themselves black because there aren't any black people here. It's all these other shades of brown, and I'm not even white. I'm this shade, and man, I'm glad I'm not, because white is a boring ass color, That's actually how he looks at it. White's such a boring color, And
there's actually a paragraph that comes later in the book, but I think it's very related to how Maniac actually makes distinctions of two different kinds of people. He doesn't really separate them between black and white. I'm going to pull this paragraph out of context, but it says, as Maniac moved through the East End, he felt the presence of not one but two populations, both occupying the same territory, yet each unmindful of the other. One yelping and playing and chasing and laughing, the other lost and silent and dying by the millions. And I think he makes distinctions between, people who just want to play and laugh and have a good time with each other, and people who just want to sit apart from the other people and keep the different people away.
Right.
And hold on to those resentments between white and black. And,
I'm sitting here thinking, as I'm looking down at the fact that we're 26% through this book right now. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't do us well to, I don't know, do a 2-parter, or...
At this point, I think we might have a 3-parter on our hands.
Yeah.
Well, the book is split into 3 parts.
Correct.
Okay. why don't we finish part 1?
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then we'll move it into a 3-parter, and that'll be what we do. That I think that works because it is a 3-part book, and there's so much here, and I really don't want to hurry. I don't want to hurry through it. I think it's such an important story, and I don't know. I felt something reading this book. I read this one twice this time, and clearly this book stuck with me because I remember reading it and wanted to read it again. Okay, good decision. So,
and we'll decide how to release the episodes.
Yeah, we'll discuss.
We might not.
Later.
We might not need to go through with releasing it every 2 weeks for the 3-parter. We can,
we might just do it next week and the week after.
I'm even thinking, once we get to the end of this part, maybe we can record at another time. Anyways, we don't need to talk about that now. Yeah. So,
all right.
So as he's going through this summer and he's just loving it here, he meets a kid who's spinning a football, and then he realizes it's Hands Down. And Hands Down realizes it's Maniac, and he's like, this is him! This is the kid right here! And everybody's just like, what are you, an idiot? This kid is a runt. He's not going to be able to play with us. And so Hands played quarterback, and he threw passes to Maniac all day. And if Hands could land the ball anywhere near Maniac, he would catch it if he could get 2 fingertips on it. And no one could tackle him. He was running through, juking and jiving, and made it all the way to the end and just kept winning. And they played stickball, and he would just pull the ball out there. They started realizing, man, this is that Maniac kid. Everybody kind of was like, here he is that Maniac Magee. And they started teaching him about trash talk. I was going
to say about his nickname. Basically, he was getting his nickname, and when he went home, Mrs. Beale one day was like, are you that Maniac? He's like, I'm Jeffrey. And so she said, inside his house, a kid gets one name, but on the other side of the door, it's what the rest of the world wants to call him.
Yeah.
So basically, he was like, I don't want to lose my name. And the reason why is because it's the last thing he has from his parents.
Right. And she even, she does definitely console him with that, with, no, you'll never be anything but Jeffrey in here. That's who you are. And, because Mrs. Beale really, these people are becoming his family for sure. They care about him. He cares about them. And, he would do anything for them. And we see that at some point.
It's such a profound statement to make. Inside his house, a kid gets one name, but on the other side of the door, it's whatever the rest of the world wants to call him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the reality of what you want versus how society will treat you.
Yep, what you're gonna get. But he was becoming pretty famous in the East End. Everybody knew there was a white kid living around there with the Beals. He ran in the morning before the fathers got up for work. He could smack a stick ball and catch a football, and he was allergic to pizza. And even little kids were constantly bringing him knots, whether it be in a yo-yo or a sneaker or whatever, and he could untie it like nothing else. Bigger kids would come down there. They always wanted to test him. They wanted to see how good he was, or how bad he was, rather. And they just wanted to know, was this kid as much as everybody's saying? And he didn't talk a lot. Hands Down did a lot of talking, a lot of the trash talk. This is where the trash talk comes in. He would tell them to smoke them suckers and poke them, joke them. You bad dudin' it, he'd say. So, just all these different trash talking things, and they'd high five and low five, and Maniac loved the trash talk. Just somehow the way that you use trash talk, he just absolutely loved it, and it reminded him of church, is how it puts it, because it had spirit and soul, and he got to a point where he was talking trash at the best of them. But then he brought it home to Mrs. Beale, and he started talking trash to her, and she looked at him and was like, "What did you just say?" And he said a little bit more. And as it started going, she ended up slapping him.
This shows how Maniac is also naive, because he
Yeah.
had no clue about social norms in as far as that goes. Because, yeah, you never trash talk a mom.
No. So, he walked in, he's thinking, like, everybody does this, right? It's no big deal. We can just trash talk.
And an East End lady in her prime?
And as soon as she slapped him, he realized he had been doing something wrong, and he said he was sorry, and he gave her a hug, and he was burying his face in her chest and just saying, I love you. And, like I say, these people have become his family, and they treat him like a son, and he sees them as parents and sisters and brothers, and he loved being there. He wanted to read Encyclopedia A, but Amanda would not let it go, so he started sneaking it in the mornings before she woke up.
But while Maniac loved almost everything about his new life, everything did not love him back. And that's the reality of the outside world about to come crashing down.
And that's
on
how
this poor kid's world.
Yeah, and we find out that, like we've been saying, he's blind to a lot of what's going on. He sees all this stuff happening around him. He sees Mars bars always trying to tackle him or trip him or veer at him with a bike, and he could see all that, but he didn't know what that stuff meant. He couldn't tell that Mars bar really might even have hated him, like just absolute disdain.
He got to be pretty oblivious to not see that this one dude absolutely hates your guts.
Right, but I mean, the way I see it is just like with the trash talk and him not realizing that's something you don't bring home. It's almost as if like he's like, oh, okay, here's Mars bar, Josh and me again, always messing around.
It's so easy to avoid getting tripped up and tackled that it doesn't really make that much of a difference to him.
Yep, not a big deal. And some kids don't like people who are different, and that having to do with maybe because he's allergic to pizza, or he does the dishes without being asked, or he doesn't watch Saturday morning cartoons. And some kids don't like kids who are another color, but he just could not get his head around the color business. He couldn't see it. He didn't see any reason to be worried about it. And it describes it here where he says, he's like, there are 7 different shades of colors on his own skin, and not one of them would he call white. And the only thing he saw as white is his eyeballs. But they aren't any whiter than any of the other kids in the East End. So it's back to that literal. He's so literal about it. And he didn't see it for a long time. And then all of a sudden, one day, boom, it hit him. He realized what was happening.
And this is the sudden crashing of the whole race question just becoming apparent to him. So it starts off it's a really hot day in August. It's so all the neighborhood folks opened up the fire hydrant and started playing in the water. And it was really happy seeing all the kids were splashing in the water. People were selling lemonade and Kool-Aid ice cubes on toothpicks. It's one of those sequences of single word sentences that really sets a good scene here. Bodies, skin, colors, water, gleaming, buttery, warm, cool, wet, screaming, happy.
Yeah, that was an interesting choice, and it felt like it's like these are just the feelings. This is what you see, this is what's happening, and it is what it is.
It's almost poetry.
Yeah, which is interesting, seeing as though Spinelli started his writing career with a poem.
That's what I was getting to.
Yep.
This is a poet writing a novel.
Yeah. He was having a blast. He was playing in the street with all the other kids. He had learned how to propel himself across the street with the jet of water. And then suddenly, among all the other screaming voices, he heard a specific voice. And he didn't think anything of it at first, but then other kids and other people in the area started quieting down. And it was this weird, thick, deep voice that was trying to... it sounded as though it had to fight its way through a can of worms. And the voice behind him started calling him a name. And he only turned because he was curious, because he didn't know what everybody else was staring at. And that's when he saw this brown finger pointing at him. And he started looking and noticing who it was, a older black gentleman, and he called him Whitey. And he was surprised that he knew that it was definitely him that he was talking to. And this man actually said, "You move on now, Whitey," the man said. "You pick up your gear and move on out. Time to go home." And Maniac is just kind of like, this is home. And the guy came up and he was like, no, you go home. You go back to your own kind. He's like, "I've seen you here. I've seen you at the black block party. Now get out of here." And Maniac's just like, still like, "I live here. I live right over there," and like points down to Sycamore. And this is where the guy tells him, it's never enough, is it, Whitey? Just want more and more. Won't even leave us our little water in the street. Come on down to see Bojangles. Come on to the zoo, the monkey house. And Maniac, even now, is like, is this guy not hearing what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to tell you, I live right over here. What are you talking about? And the guy tells him he's got his own kind, and that's how you wanted it, he tells him. Now, again, this is Maniac doesn't want that. Not at all. But he's being put with a group of people that, at this time in this book, that's how people were. And
Maniac is on the receiving end of a lot of the a lot of what this old guy has faced over his long life of being a black guy and interacting with white people who are racist.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah. Well, yes. So I mean, this guy has probably faced racism his whole life, and he's had white people treating him terribly, and then here's this kid, and he's just in this area where this whole time this guy's been like, we have to stay here. We've had to stay here. And now you're here too, I mean, and it's an old man. And even as it goes on, somebody comes out and gets the old man and starts walking away. So I'm sure he's just an old man that was, having a moment and stuff. But Maniac takes it to heart, and he didn't sleep well that night. And the next day he got up and he went running. And when he was on his way back, all of a sudden Hester and Lester were coming up and they were telling him like, "Hey, let's go run some more. Let's not go back. Let's not go back to the house." And he's like, I'll go with you. I just want to get a drink really quick, and they were trying to pull him and tug him, and Amanda came pedaling up on her bike, and she's like, hey, let's go to the store. Come on, let's go do this. And he's like, no, the stores aren't open. I'm thirsty. Let's go. And so he's like, what's wrong? And she couldn't lie to him. She didn't know. So he kind of shook loose from the kids. He runs up, and he gets up to the house, and there he sees Mrs. Beale is out front with her yellow bucket soap suds. And she's scrubbing the brick wall, and there's chalk on the brick wall, and she's trying to get it cleaned up as fast as she can, and he was just too early for her, and she'd only cleaned off the F, but somebody had written "Fish Belly Go Home" on the house, and I think we know that was probably Mars Bar, because
he was the only one that called him that.
He's the only one that called him Fish Belly,
and the reason why he called him Fish Belly is because fishes have white bellies.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep, apparently that is the way that works. So I'm thinking that we've got like 2 hours now, or pretty close to it.
We are approaching the 2 hour mark. Yeah. We've got a lot. We got a lot here, a lot of heavy stuff.
Yeah, and the thing is that we're not. I just tried to go ahead a little bit to see how close we were to part 2, and we've got quite a ways to go.
Yeah, there's still some important stuff to happen before we even get to part 2 of the book.
Yeah.
We
got
a
13
very large plot point.
13 pages, and I mean the literature's thick in this book. I didn't even realize until we started talking. I'm like, oh yeah, we'll be able to make it through this pretty good. And I'm like, holy cow. No, I mean, and I don't want. I mean, there's so much There's so much to talk about.
There's a lot behind everything from the whole legend versus reality aspect, from the whole race relations aspect, from the whole concept of where home is for Maniac. Because what's written on the Beale's house, on Maniac's house, is fish belly go home. And she's confused because, well, he's found his home. It's with the Beales.
Right.
But that's not how the outside world views it. Like, home for white people is not here. Go there.
Go somewhere else, man. You don't belong.
And it's a very hurtful thing to do to a kid who is homeless, and all he wants is a home. All he wants is a happy home to live in. So
an address. It's so important to him having an address because he never had one.
Yeah. And I mean, that comes up. That came up earlier when he said he had everything but an address, and it comes up again.
So, yeah, I think this is a good stopping point for this one, because we're right before a large part, but that itself is going to take up a lot of time.
So, we are going to come back to this. We are going to do an episode 3, part 2 for Maniac Magee, and we're probably going to need a part 3 also.
We'll see what happens.
We will see what happens. All right, so we're going to bring part 1 of this episode to a close and just kind of tie things up. We don't have any listener mail this week, not even from that devilishly handsome dude who sent us mail last time.
Can't believe he sent you nudes. So weird.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. What was he thinking? Although he did look pretty good. But anyways, if you want to send us your nudes, no, don't do that. Don't send us nudes, please.
No, please, no nudes.
Send them to Josh at gmail.com.
Yeah, if that you want to send us, probably is very happy about that.
Some guy named Josh is getting all these nudes all of a sudden. Like, what the fuck happened, man?
But if you have any questions, any comments, anything to say to us, you can send us an email to ReLiterated at gmail.com.
You can reach us on Twitter at ReLiterated.
Or join us on the subreddit. That's where I hang out most of the time, and that's at r/reliterated.
That would be reddit.com/r/reliterated if you're typing it into your web browser.
And I throw some photos up on the Instagram here and there. Don't really understand Instagram that well, but I will keep using it if it starts getting some kind of following.
No, we're just ReLiterated on Instagram.
Yep, ReLiterated.
So we appreciate you sticking around with us this part 1 of Maniac Magee. Thank you for listening. ReLiterated is brought to you by the Chocolate Milk Friends. If you enjoyed this show, please share it. Subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podbean, Google Podcasts, if you really must, or any podcatcher app that pulls from these sources. And we'd really appreciate your review and rating on whichever platform you use, especially if you like us, because it helps us grow our audience.
Absolutely. Those reviews and the ratings help a great deal because it gets our name out there for the different podcast apps. And that's the best thing you can do if you are interested and you want to help out.
All right. So we shall see you in part 2 of our discussion on Maniac Magee next time on ReLiterated.